Finally, the horrors of the KKK has been revealed, and you will not believe what actually happened. Let's get right into it. Violence against blacks has always been an accepted part of the Ku Klux Klan's credo. A surge in interest in the Ku Klux Klan was followed by a subsequent decline in said interest. The Klan's power always rose and fell in waves throughout its history, to the point where, at some point, the strategies that were utilized to bring together Klan members finally became the hooks that were used to drag them down. It's possible that the nation's oldest Ku Klux Klan organization has closed its doors for good. Fear, the foundation upon which the Ku Klux Klan built its legacy, has never been eradicated. They identify themselves as white patriots and knights of the Klan, and they have recently returned to the Tennessee town of their origin. How it all started before the horrors of the KKK was revealed. This is Pulaski, Tennessee, and on the evening of Christmas Eve in 1865, 6 former Confederate soldiers got together to organize a social club. That was the beginning of the Ku Klux Klan. The Greek term for circle served as the source of inspiration for its name. Hoods and robes were worn by members of the Ku Klux Klan to intimidate persons of African descent while they were inside their houses. The Klan's first imperial wizard was Nathan Bedford Forrest, but as people of African descent began to vote, the KKK and other groups of its like became increasingly violent. However, only a few years later, the Klan went silent. By the year 1872, they had pretty much achieved all of their objectives, thus they didn't really have any reason to put on a sheet any longer, because you had a person or a guy working for you in the state legislature who could pass legislation that were favorable to your interests. Birth of a Nation was the very first movie to ever be shown inside the White House, and it did so in 1915. The original novel, which it was based on, was written by a friend of President Woodrow Wilson, who was in office at the time. You should realize that it's a 3-hour movie that portrays black males as dangerous and violent, which contributed to a decade of lynchings committed in the name of racial dread. And as far as we can tell, that story is still being told to this very day. Another war veteran, William J. Simmons, was moved by the movie and began to rekindle the embers of the Ku Klux Klan. This time, however, they were directed not just against black people, but also at Catholics, Jews, and newly arrived immigrants to the country. When people find out that there were 1 million members of the Ku Klux Klan across the United States, they are horrified. The Ku Klux Gang disseminated its corrupting influence throughout the community. However, you had a large number of individuals, and by that I mean a large number of officials. You had governors and senators. But by the 1930s, the Klan's membership had dropped from the millions to the thousands. As the Ku Klux Klan chapter in New Jersey leases out the camp for a single day, it is not allowed for photographers to take pictures of everything. While the Ku Klux Klan did have a national organization, there were also copycat organizations that fought over funding, dragged each other into court, and contributed to the public's growing disdain. In 1944, the Internal Revenue Service conducted an investigation, and then they wanted $500,000 in overdue taxes. That dealt a severe blow to the KKK, but its members quickly recovered. The resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan coincided with the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement in 1954, and the order by the Supreme Court to desegregate public facilities. Attacks against freedom riders and activists were carried out by members of Robert Shelton's United Klans of America in cities ranging from Birmingham to Anniston. 3 civil rights workers were killed in Mississippi, and the White Knights of Mississippi were the ones responsible for their deaths. In addition, the Ku Klux Klan was responsible for the bombing of the Baptist Church in 1963 and the murder of Mother of 5, Viola Luzo, in 1965. Although the FBI was able to infiltrate the group and put a stop to the bloodshed, the brutality was not the only problem. In addition to this, they have the nonviolent acts that were carried out by organizations such as the White Citizens Council. In locations like Montgomery, Alabama, where I currently reside, they immediately began establishing these private institutions after the Brown versus Board decision. And even now, parents do not put their children in the same classrooms as children of color. David Duke made an effort to promote a new kind of Ku Klux Klansman. He made an attempt to argue that they were nonviolent and that their primary concern was the rights of white people. He was quite photogenic, which contributed to the amount of publicity that he received. Because of this, the size of his Klan group began to increase. After that, there are figures such as Bill Wilkinson and Fraser Glenn Miller Jr. Although the numbers were lower than before, the violence nevertheless resulted in people losing their lives. In order to study the Klan and pursue legal action against them, Klan director Randall Williams attended multiple gatherings. There was an oddly joyful and family-like aura of white supremacy present in several of these activities. Because of the KKK's emblems, its members were easy to identify and target. In addition, memberships, reams of propaganda material, assets, and bank accounts turned into liabilities that organizations such as the SPLC might use to bring the Klan down in court. Viola Mae Donald was awarded $7 million in a lawsuit she brought against the United Klans of America in 1987 for their role in the killing of her son, who was 19 years old at the time. They began to realize in the late 1970s that white power activists, such as members of the Ku Klux Klan, radical tax resistors, white separatists, supporters of Christian identity, and neo-Nazis, amongst a whole host of other people, all shared a sense of impending doom. I'm not just referring to Klansmen in this context. I include all of these groups. People came together to form what became known as the White Power Movement, in response to the heightened sense of urgency and the widespread feeling of dissatisfaction with the administration. The robes and crosses worn by KKK members are less common now, but the strategies that the Klan employed to recruit new members have been successful for decades. One key lesson: in the early 1980s, members of the Ku Klux Klan created a network known as the Liberty Net and found out how to use the internet. The new white power organizations are now able to communicate effectively without drawing attention to themselves or making themselves an easy target. It is important to keep in mind that the activism of these people is driven by the conviction that they and their families are the only ones who can prevent the destruction of the world by their own efforts. They view changes in ethnic demographics as the end of the world and the destruction of everything that is important to them as a result of this. They considered it to be an emergency situation. If you want to see more great content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The Ku Klux Klan did not have any organizational structure that went beyond the chapter level. On the other hand, throughout the South, there were parallel organizations working towards the same objectives. Klan chapters expanded throughout the South as part of an insurgent movement opposed to Reconstruction and preached white supremacy. A veteran of the Confederate Army named John W. Morton established a Ku Klux Klan lodge in Nashville, Tennessee. The Ku Klux Klan operated as a covert vigilante group with the goal of reestablishing white supremacy via the use of intimidation, violence, and even murder. Click on the next video to find out more.